A huge explosion at an industrial facility in Morgan City prompts an evacuation of residents and an investigation by facility officials. Karen Whitney is live in Morgan City with more details. Karen, what can you tell us right now?
Jim, a tremendous explosion rocked the Apex Riverview facility about an hour ago, injuring at least 2 workers and causing an evacuation of much of the surrounding neighborhoods. It began with what residents say was a series of frightening explosions. Residents within a quarter-mile radius are being evacuated to local shelters right now. This incident has brought out ongoing concerns, fear, and anger from neighbors who have worried about having this facility in their front yard, especially since a serious fire broke out just over a year ago.
Well, there was an explosion. First, after the first one, well, there was probably 2 more after that. There was fire up in the air, maybe 100 feet, maybe.
Everybody went crazy. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know which way to turn or what to do.
This is home. We thought we'd grow old here, you know. This is home to us. But it looks like it's not going to turn out that way. It's not like I'm hurrying back.
I'm scared to lay down at night and go to sleep, you know. I mean, there could be another explosion or something.
Or even worse.
Yeah, or even worse.
A few moments ago, I spoke with David Bowen, manager of the facility.
If you were the manager of that facility and a reporter asked you for an interview right after the explosion, what would you do? What would you say? We're going to give you a simple, low-risk way to deal with the news media during an emergency. It's media training for company people who aren't professional communicators and who don't deal with the media very often, if at all. It assumes...
We've had an incident and we're assessing the situation to find out what we need to do to bring the situation under control.
Does anyone know how the fire started?
There's a lot of factors and variables involved, and I really wouldn't want to comment on that.
There was a report that a contract welder may have accidentally started this fire. Now, if that is the case, what recourse do you have?
If we can prove that a contract employee violated safety procedures, then we can terminate their contract and bar them from the facility. In fact, we have done that before.
The fire still is not out. What happens if that tank should explode?
Well, then we'd have a major problem. We'd have product going everywhere and starting secondary fires. We've got a lot of product at risk here, but we're trying to keep the situation under control, keep it from getting out of hand.
A number of neighbors say that for some time they have worried that something like this was going to happen. And in fact, you had a very serious fire here 14 months ago. Why can't you keep this sort of thing from happening?
First, let me say that 99% of these comments are coming from a handful of malcontents, and they will not be happy no matter what we do. But as far as preventing this sort of thing from happening, I think we've got a pretty good safety record. Of course, we're not in a perfect world, and any time that you have an industrial setting like this, there's always a potential for a problem.
Not a very comforting thought for several hundred frightened neighbors as well as family members of the injured. Karen Whitney, News 8, reporting from Morgan City.
David may not have realized it, but several things went wrong in that interview. We'll find out what... The quiz you just took gives us an idea of how good your instincts are about dealing with reporters during an emergency. You'll review the exercise at the end of the program. You might change your mind about a few things by then. David Bowen was trying to do the right thing, but he made quite a few mistakes in his interview that he wasn't even aware of. That's what usually happens. Let's start at the beginning.
What is the situation right now?
We've had an incident, and we're assessing the situation to find out what we need to do to bring this matter under control.
Bowen went into this interview without a clear idea of what he wanted to say or how he'd end the interview after he'd said it. He plans to stand there and answer questions until the reporter gets tired and gives him permission to leave. That's a classic mistake that creates big problems. Then Bowen says he'll assess the situation and decide what to do about it. Now think about that. His people are highly trained. They've already notified authorities, implemented their emergency response plan, and deployed ER teams. But Bowen creates exactly the opposite impression, suggesting that he doesn't know what to do about it. In any emergency, you've got to show your community that you know exactly what you're doing and are on top of the situation. You do that by telling clearly and simply how you are handling the emergency.
The fire still isn't out. What happens if that tank explodes?
Well, we'd have a major problem on our hands then. We have a lot of product that would go everywhere and start secondary fires, and obviously we have a lot of product at risk here, so we're trying to do everything we can to keep the situation from getting out of control.
See, instead of a tank fire that's about to be put out, now everybody's thinking about a series of chain reaction blasts all over the facility, just by talking about a possibility. By the way, 2 workers have been hurt, and we're well into an interview, and Bowen still hasn't said a word about injuries. He's talked about assessing the situation and how much product is at risk, but nothing about the people who were hurt or who might be. Maybe he figured that's the reporter's job. But to a viewer, it appears he's more concerned with his product than he is with his people.